my own professional slide turner. Awesome. So I get the joy of going after lunch. It's always fun. I see some of you have coffee, so good choice. I was going to pay Gary off to get coffee for everyone, but it doesn't look like that worked. So he owes me money somewhere. So next. So thank you to everyone who came out here today. Greatly appreciated. Big thanks to Brian, Carrie, Gary, Facility, Eric, everyone in MPI, all of you guys for traveling from far away, and some of you really far away to get here. It's an honor to work with all these guys. I first met Brian in, I think, 2005. He was down in Arizona doing a presentation for the IYCA, and I saw him just kind of sitting off on the side, and was like, oh, it's like kind of, like, he looks kind of angry, a bunch of tattoos. I don't know, but I'll go talk to him. So literally just talked to him just for a couple minutes, and that was it. He doesn't remember the conversation, so it's okay. Then just started following all this stuff, and actually signed up again for one of the first FTR coaching programs he had 4 years ago now? 4, yeah. And I remember, same thing you guys have probably done too. He's like, hey, I got a new coaching program coming out. It's awesome. So I go to the link, sign up, send my money. Hey Brian, I signed up for your new coaching course. Can you tell me what it's on? I have absolutely no idea what I even bought. So we just started talking and everything from there. So now we're here, which is pretty awesome. Next. You can't tell, that's a water ski picture of me, and yes, I'm actually wearing a lab coat in that picture. So I do stuff like that for fun, just because I think it's fun. From snowboarding to even kiteboarding. I do a lot of experiments. You guys have probably heard. So who in here, like if you get married or live with your significant other, has a temperature difference in your house? Anyone have that issue? Someone likes it one way, someone likes it the other way. So when I got married to Jody about 5 years ago now, so we initially moved in. I was used to having the house in the winter pretty cold, like 62, 63 Fahrenheit, a little chilly. She was not too fond of that. She said there's penguins running around and stuff. So I said, okay, so we turned up the temperature. And so like any other good scientist, in my thought process, I'm thinking, all right, so there's, homeostatic regulations of temperature, and then take a while. So over time, I turned the temperature down a little bit, and I didn't tell her. So yeah, let's see if we get by 71 for a while. Didn't hear anything, all right, let's try 70. Then she's like, it seems colder in here. All right, so back up to 71 again. So I had a little algorithm in my head for how far down I would run the temperature and how often she would complain, so then I would go back up. Then if I didn't hear any complaints for 2 weeks, I'd try to go back down again. So over the course of 3 years, I got her down to, it was right around 64 degrees. And if you ask her, she would say she was very compliant and bought lots of fuzzy socks and hooded sweatshirts and stuff too. What's even funnier is she knew nothing about this till I told that story at the fitness summit 2 years ago. And she's sitting in the front row, and I see her look, and for a split second I see her go like, oh, all right. I was like, oh, oof. Made it past that one, all right. So, next. That's me wearing a lab coat snowboarding, so, next. So here's our outline for today. And what's interesting is I literally wrote this first line like 4 days ago before I got here. So it's amazing how well that jives. So are you in or out? Rig the system, low-hanging fruit, security blanket associations, readjust older associations, create new ones, and then when all else fails. So all that probably sounds a lot like Greek right now. Hopefully in the end, it'll make sense. So next. That was my alternative outline. I was just going to do that. So, be all good. Next. So, unlearning and learning. How I think of them is they're almost like two sides of the same coin, right? There's a lot of debate in literature about what is really unlearning, what is really learning, how are they interface with each other. So, the purpose of this talk is I'm primarily just going to focus on unlearning. And in the module 2, level 2, module 3, I do a whole module actually on learning. So I need to do my Ryan Lee upsell voice, you know, go out, run out and buy it or whatever. So for this one, I did primarily just unlearning. I did a horrible disservice to Finley. So next. So this one is just actually the only picture of a neuron I have in the whole slide. And I think if we look at it, it makes a lot more sense to think about how neurons are next to each other in just terms of associations. So in our brain, we've got tons of neurons everywhere, which is just the basic formation of it. And they're all interconnected in multiple different ways. And it's hard even when you just look at pictures, because all the pictures show just this 2D representation. And in reality, it's all three-dimensional, so there's different connections all around. And we used to think that years ago, so example, if you're looking at pain, there's got to be one pain center in the brain. We find that pain center, we'll go in with some RF ablation or something and burn that crap out. No more pain. Woohoo! We're awesome. And as you can figure out, that didn't work at all. So what they found with certain things is that it was distributed all throughout the brain. And while there's certain areas that do primarily more functions than other areas, it's just not really that simple. So I think if we look at it and think of in terms of associations, how well these are just plain and connected with each other. So this goes in the concept of neuroplasticity. You guys here probably heard of neuroplasticity before. We did that in level 1 also. And years ago, they used to think that your brain does not change, you know, once you reach adulthood. And now what we find is almost the direct opposite of that. Your brain is probably what they call the most plastic, or has the highest ability for change. So a fancy word there is neuroplasticity. And we're constantly building and tearing these associations with neurons next to each other. So it's not really a stagnant process, and there's not a ton of research to show what that turnover rate is, but it's probably pretty high, right? So something that has a greater capacity for change, most likely you have those being built up and torn down at very, very similar rates so that you can affect a greater amount of change that much faster. So instead of thinking of just, you know, all the fancy terms for, you know, neurons and astrocytes and all the stuff that's in there, if you just think about them in terms of associations and how they're connected and how they relate to each other, you'll be doing good. Next. So you have all the time in the world to learn everything you need to be learned, and you have less time to unlearn, right? Anyone heard of Malcolm Gladwell before? This from the book Outliers. Yeah, really good book. His other stuff I think is also really good. The book Blink, if anyone hasn't read that, I would highly recommend it. It's a little bit old now, but really, really fascinating stuff. Next. I pulled the video off just because technology just hates me. But what you can see here is that it's called a backwards bike. Has anyone seen that video? The brain backwards bike? Yeah, it's really cool. So what this guy did is he went to a local welder. Maybe you guys worked with local welders. They're amazing. They can create just the craziest stuff. And it's hard to see, but he put an extra gear on between the handlebar and basically the headset that goes to the wheel. And you can see here that if you go to the right, the wheel, because of the extra gear, is going to go to the left. Right? So it's the direct opposite of anyone who's ridden a bike, right? How many of you have ridden a bike, right? Most people? Anyone not ridden a bike? No? All right. So you know, right? Turn the handlebars to the right, the wheel goes to the right. So what do you think your chances of everyone in this room, your ability on rep 1 to ride that bike? Good or bad?
I still want to try.
Yeah, I know, I do too. I'm like, I'm going to be the one person who can do it. You know, but probably not. So he has this challenge where he gives people, he does tours, a lot of money if they can ride the bike all the way across stage. So far, according to him, no one's made it on their first try. Why would that be so hard? Why is that hard?
Because we go with what we already know.
Yeah, what we've already learned, right? So we learned that when we turn the wheel to the right, the wheel goes to the right. In this case, it's a direct opposite, right? So we're unconsciously programmed in the way that we can ride a bike. What's cool about that is it's very much a learned skill. So if you haven't ridden a bike for maybe even 5, 10 years, I would bet if we put a bike in front of you now, you could probably still go out and ride, right? That program is still held in your brain, and it's pretty rare with those things that you'll ever really forget them. However, this is a direct opposite of that. So if it's a direct opposite of that, what would you have to do in order to be able to ride that? What'd you say? Fall? Possibly. What else?
Unconsciously override that mechanism, that subconscious mechanism.
Yeah.
Every time. So it's almost like, you know, when you're learning how to shift a gear in your car where you can consciously think about it. It's not automatic yet.
Yeah. So you're exactly correct. So riding a bike for most people is unconscious, and hopefully most of you are competent in it. So to do this, you then have to change that programming somehow. And the first step of that is to be conscious. And what's fascinating about this too is he got so frustrated with it that he's like, I'm going to teach myself how to ride this darn bike. And he went out every couple minutes for months and months and months, still really wasn't able to do it. They took his kid, who hadn't really ridden a bike much at all before, and said, okay, I'm going to have you teach you to ride this one. Which do you think learned faster, him or his kid? Kid, why? Especially based on what Carrie was saying. Right, not much to unlearn, right? Not much to unlearn, no other program really to alter. So the kid was able to do it a lot faster. What's fascinating about the guy who came up with this is that he was eventually able to learn how to do it, but it took a long, long time. And what to me the most fascinating part about that is that he literally went from very little success, months, and then literally almost within one day, he was able to ride for several feet all at once. So the key with that is that people think that everything happens very linear, right? So you're working with clients, you're trying to change their mindset, you're doing all the cool stuff that we teach here, and sometimes it gets really frustrating. So you're like, I'm just not making any progress. And then literally almost sometimes it appears to be overnight, wow, they just figured something out and they're off going in some other direction. So learning and even unlearning is not purely a linear process. There's usually going to be, sometimes they call it an inflection point in there, where all of a sudden, now everything just starts working really well. There's various theories about why that happens. One of the theories is that maybe some of the neurons are trying to connect from opposite ends, and all of a sudden when they connect, now you've got a communication pathway. So I have the YouTube link on there. When we get the slides, you can watch it. It's really, really interesting.
Would someone who's dyslexic have an easier time?
That's what I wonder too, and my guess is probably not, although it's a really good question, because if their bike riding skills are really good, for that aspect, they'd probably be really good. But it's a good question, right? So a lot of the questions are, what if someone's more left-handed or right-handed? Probably not really different, but it's actually a really good question. Yep. Next. So learning versus unlearning. So why is unlearning so slow, right? In essence, it's because you have a lot of associations and connections with whatever it is you're trying to unlearn. And the sad part of the whole talk is you can speed up unlearning, but if it's something that's really, really deeply held, especially in their unconscious, it's going to take some time and it's going to take some work. It's not something you're going to expect to resolve very, very fast. So I'm not trying to piss on your leg and tell you it's raining or anything like that, right? That's just the reality of what it is. So I call that, if you have something that's that embedded, I got this from Landon Evans, that it's their security blanket. It's something that they feel really, really comfortable with, whether it's a story or a motor programming or whatever, they feel really comfortable with it, and odds are they've probably had it for a long period of time. Longer period of time they've had it, more ability to create more and more associations. It's going to be much harder for them to unlearn. And some people even go as far to say is, I don't think you can never unlearn that, which I don't agree with at all. I think you can unlearn and unlearn whatever you want. It just may take more time to do that. Next. So the big question then is, for exercise, so what exercise do you feel is responsible for most of your progress? Right? You could change this to mindset, what story do you feel most attached to, that type of thing. What you're trying to get to is, what do they have built the most associations? What do they currently believe is responsible for most of their success. So if a client comes in and tells me, I say, hey, what exercise is most responsible for your current success? Oh man, it's, standing on the Bosu bow with my right arm and I'm doing left arm bicep curls while I'm watching birds fly by or whatever. It could be like the weirdest, dumbest thing of what I think an exercise is, but do you think that that's probably going to show up in their program? Would you say yes or no?
No.
I would say yes, right? Why? What are the odds are that they're going to be able to drop that exercise from their programming for the next couple months? Good or bad? Probably pretty bad, right? Because they think they have a whole bunch of associations for whatever weird reason that that's what's responsible for their success. Right? So if I send them a program and it's not in there, their first thought is going to be, who's this crazy ass trainer I hired? He's a moron. I told him what the best exercise for me is and he didn't put it in my program. Whether you disagree with the exercise or not, very debatable. In their head, they're thinking, oh, it's not in my program. This guy doesn't even bother to listen to what I told him, right? So that I would say is probably also a way to identify what their sort of security blanket is. And that's probably going to be the thing that's going to be one of the harder things to change. And what's really hard is that people want to change that thing first. And they're going to pound their head against the wall, right? And they go, oh, why is this client not listening to me? I can't figure out what's going on, right? And you're literally asking them to unlearn a whole bunch of stuff within a very short period of time. So I would say don't start there. But know that you're going to try to modify it over time. But if you can identify sort of what that is, whether that's mindset, it's a big story that they have, things of that nature, always be aware of it. And by definition, you definitely want them to work on it. But I would not expect them to make a massive change with that overnight. Next. So start with what is easy, right? So I call it rig the system. They don't recognize who that guy is?
Wall Street. Wall Street.
Yeah. What is he famous for?
Green's good.
Right. Exactly. So I typed that rig the system into Dr. Google, and that's the picture it spit out. So that's pretty appropriate. That's how you pick a lot of your images real fast. So it's okay when you're working with someone to rig the system so that they're successful, right? In my opinion, that's a good idea to do, right? Because if they believe, let's say, one of their stories is that they're not successful for whatever reason, you want to set up their initial program, whether that's training, nutrition, mindset coaching, so that they are successful going forward. So that may be a little bit of a slower process. So they're going to have fewer associations with things that are relatively new, right? So one of the things that I did purely by accident, when I have a gym where I train people primarily out of my garage, people would come in and they'd say, hey, what type of exercise have you done for whatever your goal? Oh, my goal is fat loss. All right. I did a lot of that machine training, wherever they had, and the guy just counted reps, 3 by 10, and that's all I did. Oh, okay. We don't do any of that stuff here. Now look at the gym. It's like, power rack, kettlebells, tires, sledgehammers. So we don't use any of those things you did before. And I would literally tell them that, this is more successful. This will work much better for you. It's kind of sort of a lie, but the reality is I knew that the program I was going to do with them would work. And I was trying to disassociate myself from all the other sort of past failures that they had. I wanted them to start with making new associations without trying to connect it to everything that they've ever done before in their life. So if you can find something that's new, and especially if it's in even a different context, or just make it a little bit different, even change the wording, whatever, they're less likely to try to take that thing and connect it to everything else over time. So that'll be your easiest way to do that. So if they say maybe they change their goals, right? I just want to do some running for a while. All right. Have you ever ran before? No. Okay. I'm not going to probably have you run 10 miles, right? Not only is that physically a risk, what happens if you fail and miss 10 miles? How are they going to feel? Right. Failure, right? oh, I suck at this too. Ah, I sucked at all the other stuff I did before, right? And they'll try to go down the downward spiral and try to connect that to their unconscious story that they've had before. But if I say, let's just run a quarter mile and see how that goes. Oh, good. Well, see, you did that. That's more than you've ever ran before. Cool, you already got a PR. Awesome. It sounds kind of weird, right? You're like, oh my God, why did you start with even a quarter mile? That's not going to do much, right? But you want them to build on those small successes, right? You want to keep those new associations going. Next. So one of the things I use this to destroy the unlearning is bubble gum, right? Anyone got bubble gum stuck in their hair before? Yeah, a couple people, all right, yeah. So the question I would have is, if we put it in someone like Jody's hair, compared to, where'd Brian go? Brian's here. A little bit of hair that Brian has, which one is going to get stuck in more? Why? More hair, right? She actually has hair, right? Yeah, exactly. So you can think of the hair as, in essence, the same thing as, oh, I even got a pointer, that's cool. The hair is that they're associations that they're neuronally making, right? So the bubble gum is, whatever crazy idea they have or whatever it is. If you don't have that many associations connected to it, it's going to be pretty easy to get out, right? But the more embedded that it is, it's going to be much harder to get out. So in terms of mindset, if people get, let's say, the analogy of bubble gum stuck in their hair, what's the first thing they normally do then at that point, after they complain that it's stuck in their hair? They try to get it out, but what happens most of the time when they try to get it out? It gets worse, right? What do? They almost completely entangle it, so it's like a huge mess. Now how easy is it to get out? Not easy, is it? Right? So the reason I mention that is that be careful when people want to associate, whether it's a new mindset, nutrition, exercise, or whatever, to what they did before. It's almost like the bubble gum in your hair. They have a tendency to really want to entangle it and go, well, now I'm screwed. No, it's just a big mess now, right? So there's different wording and stuff you can watch in clients. And again, like the exercise example, I try to keep them separate. I don't want their sort of failures becoming attached to what they had done in the past. Make sense so far? Did I lose anyone there? No? All right, next.